such a nice group of people. But Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu.
Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
I'm going to start off by reading a letter from an 18-year-old who escaped the collapse in Miami. I woke up to a huge bang that I perceived to be thunder. I wasn't familiar with the sound. I went outside on my balcony to see what happened. I looked to my left toward the beach, and I literally saw part of my building and the entire pool deck collapse. I went into survival mode. I am not exaggerating when I say this was life or death. The entire building started to shake, and then the power went out. I thought then and there that I was going to die and that the building was going to collapse with me and my family in it. Immediately, my parents and I grabbed our dogs, and we went to try and escape the building before it falls. As I walked in the hallway, I was inhaling dust and smoke and couldn't see, even with my flashlight on the phone. We took the stairs down to the garage because the lobby door was shut from the rubble. We had to climb up tons of debris and jump over a few boulders to get onto Collins. We got out of the building with minor cuts and scrapes. My whole family, including my pets, are alive, no injuries. I seriously thought that it was the end of my life. I just wanted to share this moment for a few reasons. For one, it's helping me cope with what's going on by writing it out. Also, I want to remind you all that life is very short and we never know what our last day is. Make sure to live every moment to its fullest. Then he sent a follow-up message. I appreciate all the kind messages. I am blessed to be in a community so generous. Immediately when I escaped the building, there were neighbors and houses nearby offering bottles of water and shoes because me and my family escaped without shoes on. We're heading over to buy new clothing now because all we have are the clothing we're wearing. He talks about NBC and CNN and Wall Street Journal trying to contact him. I feel bombarded by phone calls from those reporters. I haven't responded to them and I don't intend to. I've also done some reflecting and I realized that I learned a lot about myself. When I thought that I was legit going to die in that situation, all emotion left my body. I had never been more determined to do anything in my life to get blankety blank out of the building. When your life is on the line, all bets are off and you'll do anything to survive. Despite the chaos and confusion, I had a clear mind and was able to guide my parents as well as another family we ran into in the stairwell out of the building. There was no other option, to be focused or to die. The best way that I picture the moment is like 9/11 when there were tons of dust to the point you cannot see or breathe. As soon as I opened the door to my apartment on the 3rd floor, I couldn't see inches in front of me. Again, I love you all and appreciate everyone's messages.
How very fortunate that he got out. Wow. That was amazing.
Yeah, I thought it was because he was writing to his fraternity brothers. He wasn't writing to a newspaper.
I wondered what floor he was on, but he does say at the end he came from the 3rd floor. Yeah. So I don't know how many stories there were in that building. There were quite a few, I think.
I think 10.
10, yeah. And for him to have gotten out of the 3rd floor, I think was quite miraculous. Good for him and his family.
So in any event, our hearts break and we go out to the people. But I think one of the things that struck me the most was he felt the kindness of the community. And offering that bottle of water or a pair of shoes meant the world. It couldn't change what was happening, but when people care for people, when
Yeah.
people care for people. They
Yeah.
didn't ask who was a Republican, who was a Democrat. They didn't check color. They
Right.
helped.
Right.
And apparently it was a polyglot building with people, I guess, who represent America, just everybody. Okay, so our hearts go out to them, and I wanted to share that with you. I just got it yesterday, and it touched me.
Do you know him?
No, my grandson got the email as a member of his fraternity.
Oh, okay.
Calendar. Saturday evening, there's a Jim Ruxin tonight. Even though you're eating, Jim.
I'll stop. Sorry I'm late. It's called Winter Journey. It stars Bruno Ganz, but you'll think it's a documentary. It's about a man who escaped the Nazis from Germany. He was a musician and made his way to the US and performed in symphonies until he retired to Arizona 50 years before this film takes place, or 60 actually. And his son decides to interview him. So the only person you see on camera is Bruno Ganz himself, the musician. And you hear the son's questions, and there's something troubling the son, trying to get to the bottom of the father's past. And it's really all about, even though this man was not a camp survivor, he's still a survivor, lost his whole family. And it's about the scars he carried with him, but couldn't talk about to his own family. And I programmed it not because it's so much fun, but because it really creates a palpable sense of why some survivors hide their experiences.
Sure.
It's a new definition of survivor's guilt. There are many, but I think it's a really important film for us to understand. So that's 7:30 tonight. If you need it's a free Vimeo link, and just write to me and I'll send one to you so you can see it this afternoon. It's Jim Ruxin at yahoo.com. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
You're going to put it in the chat? Okay.
Yeah.
July 3rd, we will have our annual guest virtually. Rabbi Fratello will be here to share teaching with us. I'll be here, but Tony is a great guy. The major reason I've grown reluctant to invite him is that he's a very attractive teacher, but I'm gonna take the risk with you guys, and we'll do it. So that's July 3rd. Should be lovely. Saturday night, July 17th, Erev Tisha B'Av. So just be aware that Tisha B'Av is already here, because Rosh Hashanah is like the 6th of September or something. It's all happening quickly. Okay, that's calendar. Do a little bit of checking in. I don't want to take anyone's prerogative about checking in, but Tamara, you had a wonderful celebration this week with a final submission. What did you submit this week?
I submitted the manuscript, the commentary on Ezra Nehemiah, to my publisher after too many years of working on it.
And what is the size of this mini document?
800 pages. Too long.
Which, by the way, is longer than Ezra and Nehemiah. I mean, that is quite obvious. Okay, so Mazel Tov for that. Mazel Tov for that. Other sharing. Yeah, okay, Mona certainly, but Mona wasn't a script. It was like, yeah, I hope it'll be as interesting as you're writing. We'll see what happens. Other sharing, things going on in your lives. Howard?
We attended a bar mitzvah at the Wilshire Boulevard Temple last Saturday in Koreatown, and it was the first time that there had been anybody in there for 15 months having a open service. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I imagine it is. It's wonderful. And, being at services in Koreatown presents all kinds of wonderful eating options as well. So that's excellent. Any other things that people would like to share? Things going on? Everything cool? Okay. Very good. Good. We're going to be doing Numbers chapter 23, verse 4, and it's in 1054 in the Plow Torah commentary. And of course, I failed to get the women's commentary, and I'll get it out now. Numbers 23, 4, and
23, 4.
I think we have, let's see. Yes, here we go. 24, 22, 20.
9:45.
I was going to say 9:45. Here it is, 9:45. Thank you, Cindy. Was that you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, so we have that. We know,
Please, what about chapter and verse, please, for the regular? Where are we? Chapter and verse.
23, 4.
23, 4, thank you.
Okay, so you're studying Torah this morning. Good, that's nice. Now, we know the story of Balak and Balaam, right? We know that. So who can give me a summary about who Balaam was? Just who is Balaam? We know this guy. And, you know, in the book of Numbers, I have lots of friends whom nobody else likes. I liked Korach a little bit, and I liked Balaam a little bit, and I'm pretty much alone on that. But who is Balaam? Who is Balaam? Howard.
Balaam was a pagan priest. He was not descendant of, not part of Sinai, and he was sent by his king Balak to curse Israel. And his
Yes.
donkey, and he rode his donkey, and his donkey could see God, but he couldn't.
Yeah, that's one of the great all-time things. I mean, the scene of the donkey, seeing the angel and stopping, and Balaam, yeah, he was a prophet, but he couldn't see this expression of God. Okay. Anything else about Balaam that you want to offer before we actually get into the weeds here? Anything else? He's the author of what?
Ma tovu alecha Yaakov.
Yeah, it's a good way to begin the morning. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. So that pagan prophet, in no way related to the Jewish community at all, a pagan prophet, was called upon by his sponsor, the king of Moab, Balak, and he was called upon to curse the Israelites. Why? Why was he called upon to curse the Israelites? There was nothing else to do that afternoon, so let's go out and curse some Jews. Cindy.
They were moving into the territory, and he feared that they would conquer him.
Right. It was a defensive maneuver, if you will. And in my broadcast Thursday evening, Friday, one of the things I talked about, and I'm not going to talk about today, is we say it quickly and easily. What was Balaam? Balaam was a pagan prophet. A pagan what? A pagan prophet. You mean a prophet like the Jewish prophets? Yes, like the Jewish prophets. You mean God spoke and gave revelation and instruction and inspiration to people other than Jews? Yes. And we sometimes let that slide. So I focused a little bit on that Thursday evening, Friday when I did this thing, and it struck me as a very, 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 very important lesson. We Jews have never asserted that we have the sole possession of all truth that ever is, was, or will be. We never have said that. That's not what goes on. So do we believe that God speaks with other people, that God speaks through other prophets? Yes, that position, by the way, was part of what made the rabbis in the Talmud and beyond turn against Balaam, because they wanted to shut off the possibility that God will speak with other people. And so some of the rabbis even taught, after Balaam went bad, God stopped talking to non-Jews. So that took care of that. Steve Miller.
Well, but I always view it in today's view of theology or whatever, that there can be one God, and it's our God, perceived by others differently, but the same God, as opposed to this implication that it's a different God speaking to those people. I mean, I can see our God speaking to the Muslims. They might misinterpret what he's saying, but I still think it's the same God.
I don't think, if I misspoke, I'm not saying that it was a different God. This is God, our God, Jewish God, Shlomo, whatever his name is, speaking to Balaam in a way that he would be understood to speak to Isaiah or whomever. It is the same God. And
So it's not the pagan gods that he worshiped
that is correct. It is God. It is God, our God, the right one, the correct, the passage that has guided me throughout life is the passage from the prophet Amos. Halo chivnei kushim atem li b'nei Israel. Are you not like unto me as the Ethiopians are, O children of Israel, or other peoples? And it lists that Amos has God saying that God has close connected relationships with all peoples. Same God, all peoples. And in Balaam presents the example as to how that's possible, and also it stimulated enormous negative response by some of our forebears.
But isn't that only in this passage? Whereas prior to that, he was still a prophet, presumably being guided by different gods that he had.
No, Steve.
No? Okay, good.
It is assumed that he was a prophet of the good God, ours, the right one, the only, whatever, but ours, and that's who he was. So he's there as a real spokesperson for God. And when Balak hired him, it's because this dude had pretty good information about what's going on in the world. Penina.
First of all, I think it's important that we should understand what was the role of the prophets. People think that prophets were some kind of magicians that can predict the future. The prophets actually just warn the people of things that were possible to come if they are not going to behave accordingly to the Ten Commandments or to the social laws that existed that will intend to better the society they were living in. For example, when the exile came with the Assyrian.
Penina, we're not going to do an exploration of prophecy now. You are correct.
Yeah, okay.
Ani maskim itach.
Okay.
Totally, yes. But I am making a peripheral reference before we actually get into the text. And yeah, the prophets were not fortune tellers.
Sorcerers.
Yeah, they did. The best book, I no longer can say it's the best book because I certainly haven't read all that's been written since then. But if you ever want to get really into a superb consideration of what a prophet is, Heschel, and the book is engagingly titled The Prophets. So not too hard to remember. It may not be that his point, that's the book. Show them how thick it is. It's a book. It's a real book. Tamara does not deal with small books. The understanding that Heschel had is compelling, even though it may not be absolutely the way things are, were, whatever, but it's a compelling, wonderful, wonderful consideration of prophecy. What I want to do today is do what we have not done with this section, and that is actually read the prophecies, actually read the text. Effie will be happy. We're going to go verse by verse. Okay, Effie? Verse by verse. Yes, thank you. Verse by verse. So we're on page 1054, or we're on 23.3, and we're going to go line by line and try to figure out, and I do want your participation, figure out what's happening here, what's being said. So verse 4, it starts off. Now I'm using the Plout commentary here. God became manifest to Balaam, who stated, I have set up the 7 altars and offered up a bull and a ram on each altar. And the Eternal put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, etc. Return to Balak and speak thus. Okay, so that's the beginning. And I looked at God became manifest, and I was curious as to how to say that in Hebrew. So I looked into the text, and it says, Vayikar Elohim el Balaam. By the way, Balaam in English is Balaam in Hebrew, and let's not go into figuring out why that ever happened. But Balaam, same guy. Vayikar. If Donna were here, I'd bother her with the translation, but she's not here. Remember to tell her that I noticed she's not here.
I will.
Okay, thank you. But Vayikar, I believe, comes from the word kara kuf reshe, which happened upon, happenstance. So that if I were an unpaid translator, God chanced upon Balaam or whoever he is. It says became manifest. It's really a low level kind of a thing. It isn't that God went running to Balaam and said, boy, I have this message. You set up the altars. I'm going to talk to you. It's kind of like begrudging. God bumped into Balaam. Are you here again? And that's what the Hebrew, to me, seems to be saying. And he said to him, you set up the 7 altars, and I've arranged it, and all the stuff on the stuff like that. So we happen to be, this is very, very not enthusiastic. Now, the key commentator on these passages, the actual words of the statements of Balaam, is not Rashi, is not Ibn Ezra, it's Ramban, Nachmanides. Can anyone come up with a reason why you think Nachmanides was so interested in the messages of Balaam? Mona.
Well, as a scholar, I think Nachmanides was interested in a mystical connection between God and the Jewish people. So if you have the possibility of this manifestation or this happening upon even coming to a priest of another people, that certainly suggests that for people who believe or are searching for God or following the mitzvot, there should be an even better chance, I would think.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Nachmanides, interested in the mystical encounter with God, has a playground here. Believe me, he occupies it. He writes lots of stuff. And, Rashi may not be so wrapped up in the mystical experience. Nachmanides definitely is. So you got it, and that's great. So Nachmanides says, and this goes back to the question that was asked, Balaam became a prophet only to serve Israel's needs. What this means is Nachmanides says, yes, he's really filled with inspiration. God is within him, but don't get carried away with all this liberalism, because his whole purpose of being a prophet was only so that he could help the Israelites. So he had a Jewish mission, even though he didn't know it. And then Nachmanides, following Mona's suggestion, you and Nachmanides must have chatted, Nachmanides puts this in his commentary. You want to know what real prophecy is? I'll tell you. It's like from Taxi. I'll tell you what real prophecy is. He quotes Job. A spirit passed before his face that made the hair of his flesh stand up. Other, Job. Fear came upon him and trembling, and all his bones were made to shake. That's prophecy, said Nachmanides. What Balaam had, was a utilitarian, nice thing to do to help the Jewish people. Don't get carried away with pagan prophets. Okay, so we're going to get more of Balaam and of Nachmanides, and it's kind of fun. And the Eternal put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, go back to Balak and speak thus. Vayasem Adonai davar b'fi Balaam. Can you understand, discern, dig down to find out what's missing? God put the message directly into Balaam's mouth. What is omitted here? What's omitted? It's kind of fun. What's omitted? Count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, Steve.
What the message is.
Not only what the message is, but if you put the message in Balaam's mouth, what have you sidestepped?
His brain.
His brain. No, Nachmanides is on the case here. He says Balaam didn't have a clue as to what he was saying, but God put it in this pagan prophet's mouth and he spoke it, but it didn't go through any sense of understanding. So it wasn't real prophecy. Nachmanides basically says Balaam excelled in rote repetition. That's his level of prophecy. Okay. Not going to argue with him. Okay. So then, verse 7. Vayisa mishalo vayomer. Translation, he took up his theme and said, Penina, how do you translate mashal?
A proverb, something that will teach you something.
Yeah, a parable, a proverb.
Yeah.
How the translator.
Something that would look like it, or we can explain similar to something.
Yeah. So how the translator got to, he took up his theme, I don't know. And that's okay because he got paid big bucks to do the translation, so that's fine. But do you have other translations, Effie? What do you have?
No, I wanted to ask a question. Why didn't God go directly to Balak? Why did he have to go through Balaam?
Why didn't he go to Balak?
Yeah, directly instead of having to go through Balaam to Balak.
The only way I could answer that, is to say that's what God wanted, man, leave it alone. Or to say that Balaam was the man trained in the skill. And the text pretty much acknowledges that he was already of long standing a prophet. So I can't give you more than that. But what I'm looking for is, do you have another translation in your books instead of he took up his theme?
What verse are you on?
I'm on verse 7. Do you have anything else there?
No.
Anyone else? Steve?
I have parable.
That's it. Okay. I mean, yeah. Okay. A parable, a message that is contained within, it makes sense to me. Let's go on. From Aram has Balak brought me, Moab's king, from the hills of the east. Stop. Aram. This is so much fun to do. I'm sure Effie is having the happiest day of his life. Word for word, we're going here. Aram. Aram. What is Aram? Anyone know where the Arameans were? Tomorrow. What is Aram?
That's the name for Syria.
Yeah, it's yes, it's a name for Syria, part of Syria. It's Damascus, and they say Damascus and Aleppo, wherever you know where Damascus and Aleppo are, that basically was the area where Aram was. So Balak has brought me from Aram. What does this mean about Balaam? He's not the same tribe as Balak. It goes back to the same question, Effie. Why? He's not the same tribe, different people. But he was the guy in the neighborhood who was known to talk to God. Penina.
He's a man with no nation, Bli Am.
Okay.
And he was influenced by the ads, probably, because he looked at the people. He saw whatever was going on down there, maybe the amount of them, maybe the organization of them. You don't know what expired him all of a sudden, but he looked at them and he had no nation. So his favoritism for wording, whatever it is that he felt, is maybe was influenced by the view of what he saw down there. He saw the people that belong to God, that are with God. And I think the influence came from that.
So Balaam's name is spelled Bet Lamed Ayin Mem.
No, without nation, Bli Am.
And the rabbis play with that, as the rabbis sometimes play. And they say, oh, Balaam, Bali-am, a nationless person. The rabbis dump on Balaam a lot. Really, really, really don't like him. But, okay, so he's the guy, an outsider, an imported gunslinger, comes from Aram as Balak brought me, Moab's king from the hills of the east. Fine. And what does Balak say? L'cha ara li Yaakov. Come on, curse Jacob for me. U'lecha zo'ama Yisrael. Tell Israel's doom. What's interesting here in this little simple verse? Come, curse me, Jacob, come tell Israel's doom. What's interesting here? Bible scholars, come on. This is so rich. What's here? What do you see? Larry, look at it. What do you see that's interesting, strange, attractive in that little simple verse? Okay, you stayed muted just so that I don't.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, all right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, oh, Steve, you always come in at the 1. Okay.
Yeah, well, no, you always see me at the 1.
We call that passive aggressive, but go ahead.
I suspect he picks Jacob because it's Jacob who essentially brought everyone to Egypt and all of the hardships that they're now escaping and bringing these people toward the Moabites.
You're there, you're focusing correctly, missed a little piece of it. It mentions, it calls the Israelites both Jacob and Israel. The rabbis love this. They say, Balaam, God really wanted to make sure, which people do you, or you know, what was Balak's request? Balak wanted to be clear. I want to tell you whom I want you to kill. They're known as the descendants of Jacob. They're also known as the descendants of Israel. Same people, wipe them out. Okay, that's how the rabbis read this passage. It's kind of fun. Okay, it's Jacob. Oh, Jacob, is that? Yeah, Israel. Same thing, same people, wipe them out. What could it also be? It also could be a reflection of a later time in which descendants from Jacob and, you know, the two names could reflect other origins. But it's interesting that way. Now, it's not often that you get the word damn in the Torah translation, but here we go. How can I damn whom God has not damned? How can I doom when the Eternal has not doomed? When I look at the Hebrew word for the second one, doomed, somehow I didn't check my BDB and stuff, but I get zoam, which is anger. It's anger. And it translates as doom. How could I be angry with a people God is not angry with? How can I do that? And the first part, how can I curse or damn? What is this saying about the view of the Israelites here? What is it saying?
The word, excuse me, but I'm bursting. The word Israel means the one who wrestled with God and won. That was the new name for Jacob.
Yeah, we know that. That's back.
Okay, so when he hears that these people are also Israel, people who wrestled with the angel and won, then it's a different situation already than just any people that came out of Egypt.
So we have Israel may have deserved to be doomed and cursed, but it's not. How can I do, Balaam says, that which history hasn't done? I'm not going to mess with this people. So he says, Balak says, curse me, Jacob, tell Israel's doom or get angry at Israel. How can I curse what God hasn't? How can I be more angry than God? And that's really how I translate that.
Exactly.
How can I be more angry than God? God didn't do it. Merle.
He sounds to me like he's conflicted with, I should be destroying them, but God's not mad, so why should I be mad? I don't think he knows which direction to go.
Yeah, he's being pulled in two directions, which, by the way, is not at all the human condition, right? It's always clear to us which way we, oh no, that's not true. Yeah, he's conflicted. He's conflicted. He also, how can I say this nicely? He's trying to up the price on what Balak is going to pay him. If I, Harvey, if you were his financial advisor, a little bit more comment on, oh, I can't do this. How much did you say? I can't do this.
He's bartering.
Yeah, I think so. It's a wonderful, wonderful reading here. If you don't get caught up in the fact that it's Torah and therefore we can't enjoy it. You know, of course you can enjoy it. Now, so Balaam is saying, I can't do this. Now, verse 9, interesting. This is already very serious stuff. As I see them from the mountaintops, gaze on them from the heights, there is a people that dwells apart, not reckoned among the nations. That line in the rabbinic literature and among people who study Torah is as famous as Ma Tovu. Are you really hearing me? This statement by Balaam, Am levado yishkon. This is a people that dwells apart. It has been repeated by philosophers and teachers for thousands of years. That's one of the fundamental ways in which Jews self-describe. Am levado yishkon. Yes, we are one of the nations of the world, but we have dwelt apart. We do dwell apart. We will dwell apart. Am levado yishkon. And when he says this, the rabbis admit begrudgingly, he knows us. He knows us. You won't be counted among the peoples. You live apart. And by the way, much of Jewish ritual, halakha, is designed to foster apartness, including the kashrut, laws of eating, other things. I know it may not fit into the we are all God's children, whatever, but the Jewish view is we dwell apart. It doesn't say we're better. It says we are other. Steve. You're muted.
Doesn't that also, though, fuel all of the attacks on us for dual loyalty and what'll happen if our interests as Americans and Jews differ? Where will our allegiance be?
I don't see dual loyalty as being involved here.
Right.
I mean, that is a real question that people talk about parenthetically all the time. But let me just speak personally, which I never do in this setting. I have no desire to be like everybody else. Period.
You
I just don't. When in the early years of the 20th century, when the Reform movement basically moved Shabbos to Sunday, and the big services, and they were big, and you have to give them credit, when thousands of people would come to hear an Abba Hillel Silver or Barnett Brickner on a Sunday morning, thousands would come. Be guilty people, thousands would come.
And no yarmulkes?
Yeah, but it was to be like everyone else. The desire was to blend in. And okay, maybe as a stage in our movement into the contemporary world, maybe I don't condemn it. It would maybe necessary and proper. All I can say is for me today, I have no desire. I am perfectly comfortable, happy being identified as somewhat other. I have a tradition, a history, a literature, a music. It's mine. And no, it's not possessed by it's possessed by you, but it's not possessed by everybody else. And I am perfectly content to keep it that way. And I'll take a minute or two if someone wants to offer an opposing perspective. Let me just see if there's somebody else who wants to offer a different perspective on that. Am levado yishkon is one of my things. Merle, did you have your hand up?
So it's not an opposing view, because that's very much me. But 5 or 6 years ago, I was criticized by somebody who has to be like everyone else, that I'm too different, especially at my age, and that I need to be more like others my age. At that time, I was probably 65 or 70. I don't know. I have no concept of time. But ever since then, I was always different, but now I strive to be more different, if that makes sense. I don't want to be like the rest of the world. And that's not, I've been criticized for doing too much Jewish stuff like this. You know, what do you mean you can't meet me for breakfast on Saturday morning? Well, I have to do Torah study and go to services, even if it's on my desk. But so it's not an opposing view, but it's a very common view amongst people who feel they need to criticize people for being the other.
You brought to mind an image which I really shouldn't share with you, so I will. I have a really, really, really close friend who is kind of a spectacular human being, but he likes to wear golf pants. You know what those pants look like?
Golf pants.
It's loud and colorful, but he will wear them in formal settings. And at first, when I would be in those settings with him, I would try to stay across the room and not be anywhere. Oh, who's he? I don't know who he is. You know, is he your friend? But nothing has ever changed him. I am like Popeye. I am what I am.
Yep.
I am what I am.
I'm what I am. Yep.
And okay, Kevin.
Okay, so my question is not, that they dwell apart, but it's the quote, it's, as I see them from the mountaintops. Are the Jewish people on the mountaintops, or are they down below? Is he looking at them down below, or is he looking at them with them, where, he's been invited to be with them to, not be set apart, but to join them as if they are?
Okay, you always manage to pick key points, and I love it, and I thank you for that. The rabbis look at that part of the verse. First of all, there's the pshat, the simple. He is up on a hill overlooking them. Okay, so they're down in the valley. So he is up here and they are down here, and that was intentional. And of course, as Penina pointed out earlier, that's how he gets a view of the total people and has an impression of them. But the rabbis translate that differently. And I quote, I see Israel from its earliest origins. The rabbis read that from the heights to me. And again, Kevin, that's how they read it. It may not be at all what was intended, but that's how they read it. They read it as, what is the, okay, verse 9, Ki me rosh tzurim erenu. If I would have just written Ki me rosh, from the beginning, pops right out. That would have been good. From the beginning, I saw him. The rabbis believe that Balaam had a sense of Israel's earliest origins, and that's why they dwell apart. Penina.
Okay. You know, on Sukkot, we shake the four kinds. And the myrtle, I think, grows on the mountain. So history, I guess, or archaeologists, or before this, while the Sukkot tradition started, realized or thought or found out that actually the settlement started on the mountains because they weren't allowed to go into the valleys. The other nations would let them.
What is your point here on the text?
When he says Merosh Harim, they might have very well be also on the mountains, and or Merosh Tzur, and then they walked their way to the valley because they were attacked and because they were allowed to win or settle in those territories that they took a hold of, or go back to the places where the rest of the tribes lived. But the beginning started on the mountain. And then
we can take two examples of this. Do you know Megiddo? Does Megiddo, the archaeological site Megiddo?
Yes.
It is up. I can do that without moving my hand. It is, I can't. Okay. It is up on a hill overlooking a major intersection of highways. And there's a whole thing there. By being up on Megiddo, they controlled that. Megiddo, you know, has been twisted into Armageddon. Har Megiddo is Armageddon. The idea of being up on the mountain and watching the conflict taking place below as armies meet on the highway became the image of Armageddon. Har Megiddo, Mount Megiddo, Armageddon. So, you know, that is there. I saw a hand. Oh, Larry.
Isn't there also a metaphorical way to read this? You know, when I look at the 30,000 foot view and take a look at the big picture, this is what I see. And it's different from what Balak sees in his own self-interest.
Yes. And I think that's a totally legitimate way to handle this, because they're all going for metaphor, and metaphors are available. I want to share something with you in the 2.5 minutes we have left, because time fled, and I wanted to do 3 other speeches. We're going to come back next year to this session. We're going to get more of these, of the blessings, curses, whatever they are. Now, the Targum, and I'm not translating it yet, the Targum wrote, those who dwell apart will inherit the world. That's in the Targum. And I wanted to mention, because I really haven't talked about that here, there is an Aramaic translation of the Torah text. It was written by someone known as Onkelos.
Yeah.
Onkelos was a convert to Judaism who wrote the translation of the Hebrew into the language the people spoke. But Kevin, Larry, this was a Larry. Well, I forget. I am mixed up. Onkelos didn't do straight translations. He did midrash in his translations. He did metaphors in his translations. So that when you read Onkelos, you're getting a translation with a flavor. And fascinating. There came a time, believe it or not, when Hebrew was not fully understood by all the Jewish people by far. And so they had to have it translated into the language of the people. Tamara, you could validate the historicity of this, but Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi were supposedly the ones who prophetically gave the Targum to Onkelos. But I mean, that's just a fantasy out there. But you have to have this before we leave today. The Targum is a spoken translation of the Torah with midrashic elaborations. And then as I was checking through my preparation for today, I found this wonderful statement, and I share it with you as a gift of love. The Targum is a wonderful example of disambiguation. And I give that to you as a gift. I have never used that word. I think I understand it by taking it apart, but the commentary is disambiguation. And now, if you would please, when the next time you're in Starbucks sitting with somebody, and I heard this senator speak today, there's a need for a little bit of disambiguation. That, I think that would be good. So the Targum goes on here, and I'm going to end with this. Onkelos puts it into his midrashic translation. Other nations will be destroyed. Am levado yishkon, but the Israelite nation will never be destroyed. Onkelos said that. And then Ramban came in with what should be the sermon for today, and I'll leave it to you to write it. Or Jim, you can write it, movie script, however you want to handle this. Ramban, why did Balaam mention Jacob and Israel? Because the Jewish people will survive only when all who are associated with Jacob and all who are associated with Israel are Gush Echad, are one block, one people. The only thing that can destroy the Jewish people isn't the outside, it's when we are not one people. And I'm going to leave that with you and wish you a Shabbat Shalom. I had fun today, but we'll get to the rest of it next year, okay? Because I have my notes. They're already written out. I could do this, but okay. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Tonight, Tisha B'Av coming.
Are we back online next week, or are we meeting in the temple? What's the story?
We're still here, as far as I know, up until now.
Okay, thank you. Shabbat
Not
Shalom.
all of us can meet at the temple, so hopefully it'll be both ways.
That is my intention.
Good.
Thank you.
That is what I will be fighting for, is, what do they call that?
Hybrid?
Hybrid. I was going to say goes both ways, but sometimes that's confusing. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Great morning. Okay.